Alright, we're getting ready to do a tutorial on how to make this Cafe Parisian easy and affordable mini album. Just a quick walkthrough. I've already done a video on this. This is a waterfall. Photo mats on the inside of each page, a little flap. And a pocket. I will show you how to make the base of the book. Keep watching. Alright, you will need 2 pieces of chipboard, cut it 4 by 6. 1 piece of chipboard, cut it 2.5 by 6. Piece of cardstock, your base cardstock. All of mine is going to be in black. This one is 7.25 by 12. This is for the cover. You will score it at 1/2 inch and again at 1/2 inch on 2 sides. This is your binding. This is 5.5 by 9.5, scored at 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, and 7.5. You will also need 4 pages scored at, cut at 4 by 12, and on the 12-inch side scored at the 1/2 inch mark and 6 1/4. Your photo mats, you need 4 of them, cut at 3.5 by 5.5. For your waterfall, you will need 5 pages, cut at 3 5/8 by 3 3/8, and then scored on the 3 3/8 inch side at 1/2 inch. There's a side flap. You will need 4 of them, cut at 3.5 by 4, scored on the 3.5 inch side at the 3 inch mark. For your back pocket, you will need cardstock cut at 3 3/4 by 4 7/8, and on the 3 3/4 inch side you will score it at 1/2 inch. On the 4 7/8 inch side you will score at a 1/2 inch and 4 3/8 inch. You will also need, for the back of the waterfall, 3 5/8 inch. I put 5 3/8 inch and I ended up cutting it a little bit bigger than that. We can trim that off if need be. I'd rather be safe than sorry, so I did cut it at 5.5. Alright, to do the cover, we need a 7.25 by 12. These 2 sides were scored at 1/2 inch. And our chipboard. We will be lining up once there's glue on here. This chipboard here in the corner, along with those score marks, to help us line it up straight. I'll be back. Alright, I covered this in glue. I'm going to set it down on those score marks. I know most people use score tape. I'm a wet glue kind of gal. And I'm going to burnish. Flip it over. And this spreads the glue out. Okay, this would be where I use the score tape. think this is a 1/8 inch. I will clarify. If it's not, I will post it in the comments. That's my spacer, that right there. So you will use a smaller piece of chipboard. Sorry if you hear the washing machine or the dryer. My hubby's also watching television, so the dogs are chewing on bones, so. Now I put that right up against that tape there. And if you're leery as to whether this is straight or not, I grab my Tim Holtz ruler and I butt it up against this piece and this piece, and whichever one needs to move, now is the time. And burnish. This burnishing is pretty important regardless of what type of glue you use. It's what makes the glue and the paper and the chipboard become one so that it doesn't fall apart eventually. Go ahead and add some more of your spacer. Do not pull this tight. I know it looks like I'm pulling it tight. I'm just pulling it enough to make it straight and setting it down. If you pull it tight or taut, eventually it's going to want to shrink back to its original size, kind of like a rubber band. If you pull it out, eventually it will, when you let it go back to its normal size. Alright, what did I do with that ruler? Actually knocked it to the ground. Alright. Pretty straight. And burnish. Flip that over and burnish again. Alright, nice. Now this side and this side is already scored, so it's going to be pretty easy to fold. This side and this side, not so much. So you're going to have to train the paper. So you want to put it on its side and press it down and bend over. Same thing on this side, which hasn't been scored. And it's kind of like burnishing it, but what you're doing is you're just training the paper to bend and fold there. All right, here in the corner, if some of you might have a mitering tool, I actually do, and I never remember where it's at. So I just take my Tim Holtz ruler, butt it up against that corner there, and just mark a line so that you have this gap here. You're going to cut on the line with your scissors, and then you have this gap here to make sure that it does completely cover the chipboard when you're all said and done. Alright, you cut on those lines. That right there is garbage. This would be where I do use score tape. I put it right up on the edge. Oop. Again, it looks like I'm pulling it tight. Not really, just enough to make it straight. Put it near the edge, but not over the edge. You do not want any of this glue sticking out, because if it does stick out, it's really just going to attract a whole lot of dust, which will never look good on anything. Okay, on this, I'm going to burnish that also. Oop, forgot one in the sides. I am going to, again, liquid glue kind of gal. This is really what's going to be holding it together for me, but this is just going to make it to where I don't have to, score tape's going to make it to where I don't have to hold it while it sets. So I'm going to take this up, get it out of the way. And I will make sure to put liquid glue here on the very edges of the chipboard. Right, I will bend it over and literally just flip it and burnish, and then I will also make sure to rub it here on the edges. That liquid glue is going to make it stick, and it's going to make it look square here. You will get some seepage, like here, your seepage. I happen to use 3-in-1 glue or Fabri-Tac. To me, they're very similar. And it might take a little bit of rubbing to get it off, or you can use an adhesive eraser, and it will be a lot easier to do. Alright, I want to do the same thing to the other side. this little bit here, you want to fold that over. You don't want it hanging over the edge here. Okay, again, press, fold and press as you're going. I don't remember what this is called, but it's essentially a bone folder, which normally looks like this. It does the same thing. It's just easier to hold, pretty much. It's a little bit thicker and wider, but they do the same thing. Alright, go to the other side and burnish it. Anywhere there's glue where you don't want it, just take your adhesive eraser, take it off. Alright, here in these corners, you can either take your nail and press here and fold it in, or you can take your bone folder and do the same thing. Press in and fold it in, so that when it folds over, it doesn't hang over. Okay, add the glue near the chipboard again. And press and fold. Okay, with this 3-in-1 or the Fabri-Tac, well, with any liquid glue, you're going to get some seepage, but with this, when it seeps, I actually think that's a good thing, because that means it's making these edges here, there's glue all the way to the very edge, which means it won't come up once it's dry. So I'm A-okay with that. Makes a little bit more work right now, but in the end, you don't have to worry about it falling apart. Alright. Woo! Let's fold in these edges again. Alright, now you have your cover. Here on these seams, take the widest part and don't press very hard, just you want to shape the paper just a little bit, press, so that way when you go to fold it, it folds right where you're pressing. Makes it a little bit easier to fold it. All right, so there's your cover. Be back in a few minutes and we will do the binding system. All right, this is our binding. This cardstock is cut at 5.5 by 9.5. We're going to score it at 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, and 7.5. All right. So you can see, well, hopefully you can see all of the score marks there. What I'm going to do is right here in the middle of the first 3, I'm going to fold it. And when I fold it, I'm going to put this up against my board so that it's all folding straight. Both of these edges are flush. And then I'm going to take my bone folder and brush it up against there. That is pretty much your first hinge. That's the part that's going to poke up. All right. Ignoring those, you're going to go with your next 3 and do the same thing to the middle one. And fold it. Make sure it's all flush. And again, the next 3. On this one, I do flip it the other way around because I want the longer part on the bottom and flush to this top part. And then I'm going to, and then your next 3, again the middle one, make them flush. Those are the parts that are going to poke up. It's going to make a little bit more sense in a few minutes. So you take that part that's folded up, and you fold that other part back. And again, the same thing here. And you can do that on all of them. And if you want to, you can put it up against here to make sure it's flush, but it already should be. Alright, so you have your peak, valley, peak, valley, peak, valley, peak. So that's your 4 bindings. When you flip that over, I want you to put score tape right here on one side of the valley. One side of the valley only on all 4. I'm going to go ahead and use the 1/8 inch tape. Do not put it right up on the fold, but right next to it. And again, in the valley, and another valley. Because you only have 4 hinges at this point, you should only have 4 strips of score tape. Or you could, I would normally use liquid glue, but to make this easier for you guys to understand, but as far as this part, to me it's not that big of a deal. So you pull off the 1 strip and then you just fold it together. And again, same thing. Burnish, burnish, burnish. Burnishing is important no matter what kind of glue you are using. And fold it over. Because you've already trained your paper, these should just fold easily right to where they need to be. So when you flip this over, okay, I should have done this upside down so I don't have all these letters up top, but you know what? I did that in pencil so I can easily erase it. So now you have 4 hinges, which can be glued down into your cover. All right. We are getting ready to glue our hinges down onto our cover. On this, I do use liquid glue. You can use score tape if that is what you prefer. Alright, I do make sure to add glue right here. Near the edges of the chipboard. I do add a little in here just to help reinforce the folds. Alrighty, when you add this right here, and I'm doing this in pencil so I can erase it later, is where it folds. I can see it clearly, but I want to make sure you can too. So you want to center your outside pages on those folds. Right. I do believe that is centered. And I'm taking my whitest part and I'm going in between the hinges, and that's where I'm pressing down on my glue and burnishing. And then I'm going into where it folds. Pressing there, not very heavy, because you do not want to break the paper. And then you go here on the outer parts and burnish. While I'm here, it will just go ahead and get the glue that seeped out, which I'm glad it did, because that means it went to the very edge and it has a better chance of staying together. And yes, this does have pencil marks here. I'm just going to erase the part that I know will not eventually be covered with paper. Like here, this will be covered with paper. I'm not worried about that. It's the center part that will definitely be showing in the end. Oh, don't forget to, normally I wouldn't have put those marks there, but while I'm here and before I forget, let's erase those. All right. The base of your book is together and ready for pages. I am going to, while I make my pages, let all of this dry, and we'll be back. All right, now we're going to do the pages, which are cut at 4 by 12. Along your 12-inch side, I want you to score at a 1/2 inch and 6 1/4 inch. Then I will have you, this is where you just scored it. Flip it over and fold this over. Now, put this flush against the top. You're essentially kind of making a matchbook. And make sure everything's flush, so when it folds, all edges are flush. When you glue it down, you will glue this to the outside, and that is one of your pocket pages. Do that to the other 3. Alright, when it's time to glue it, just add your glue and then fold over top of it. The same thing to the other 3. Alright, we're going to glue our pages on. We just created these. They slip right over that hinge. When you glue it in, you do not want this flush up against, because once it's glued and dried and you go to flip your pages, you can even hear the crackle of the page as it's trying to fold. You don't want that. You want it slightly away from that folded edge there. I'm not sure if you can see that clearly. Just not up against it, but a little away. You can use score tape. I'm using liquid glue. You can either decorate your pages and then glue them in, or glue in your pages and then decorate them. Either way is a-okay. It's all about personal preference. Alright, I have glue on both sides. For whatever reason, I start at the back. I'm going to take this, slide it over, and kind of fold the page. And I'm making sure that it is square and flush with that, both the top and the bottom. And yet still slightly away. Let me zoom in a little bit. As you can see there, it is not all the way touching that bend, that fold there. But it looks pretty square, so burnish, burnish, burnish. And fold it. Alright, I normally make sure that my seam where I folded over is at the bottom, but apparently it looked really good because I didn't notice that it is now at the top. So now I'm going to do them all at the top. This is what I'm talking about, where it folded over, your page folded over and you glued it. So let's do our next one. Put a little bit of glue. Do not put the glue all the way down here. Whether it's score tape or liquid glue. This liquid glue is going to ooze a little bit, so I'll be good. And then you want to pretty much put it just the same amount of distance away from the edge as before. Square it up against that last page, make sure everything's flush. And then burnish, burnish, burnish. I prefer using liquid glue for this just because if you use score tape and you accidentally touch it to the score tape, you're going to have issues getting it off if it's crooked. And with liquid glue you have room for error. Alrighty. Remember me telling you this was going to be covered up? The writing on the paper, pencil marks. Well, here it goes. It's getting covered. And next. Ooh, never did go back out. Alright, go right over it. Put it the same distance away as the other ones. So that way when they're standing, this is all flush. And score it up against the other pages. Burnish, burnish, burnish. Alrighty. Okay, the 3-in-1 and the Fabri-Tac work well with this glue eraser. All the other glues, I can't say they do, so they always look shiny. You can tell it's there, but as long as while it's wet you rub it off, you're good to go with 3-in-1 and Fabri-Tac, which are both by Beacon. And I don't really have to get these areas right here, but I do just because I like my pages looking pretty for whatever reason. That's all going to be covered up. Alright, this would be the time to add, if you want flips and flaps, this is the time to do it, or pockets. Remember we have the photo mats, which fit right in there. You can cover them with decorative paper or solid cardstock. All right, our book is made. We have 4 pages. It folds. Now I'm going to create a flap. We had these side flaps. They're 3.5 by 4 inches, scored on the 3.5 inch side at 1/2 of an inch, which you fold over. That is then going to be placed. As you can see here, I'm going to just add the glue on this side here. And stick it right in there. And make sure it's nice and square. And you now have a flap. Do the same thing with the other 3. Alright, now make sure that your pocket here is still open and the glue didn't spread too far, which that one did a little bit, but we're good. Okay, you have pages with flaps. Alright, we're going to create a waterfall to go right here on this cover page. We have our cardstock 3 5/8 by 5 1/2. Originally said it was 5 3/8, but we needed 5 1/2. And then we have 6 pages, or you can do 5, you'll see in the end. They are 3 5/8 by 3 3/8. On the 3 3/8 inch side, scored at 1/2 inch. And on that score mark, you go ahead and fold it over. Alright, what we are going to do here, as you can see, they are the same width. We're going to glue that down there. Alright, I'm going to take the fold and put it right up to the top of the other piece of cardstock and make sure that it is square. actually think the folded piece is just a little bit shorter than the other one. But you know what? I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's not off by that much. All right. And now what you can do here is either glue this folded piece right up against, ooh, can you see it? The seam here from the last piece that was folded over. Wow, I so cannot see that. Changing my lighting is not helping. Or to make it even easier, you can just glue it right over that other seam. And then when it folds over, you'll see nothing. That's what I'm going to do. Alright, I'm going to take the glued side and glue it right over what I just put down. Making sure it's flush, it can still fold, and it doesn't overhang anywhere. Fold that up. Now it's a lot easier to see. So you're going to glue that hinge right up against that. Make sure everything lines up here on the sides. Burnish, burnish, burnish. And make sure you fold up. If there's any excess glue that seeps out, now's the time to get it. And again, same thing, right up against the other one. Again, like this one was a little cockeyed. Just make sure the edges are flush. Before you burnish. Okay, you can glue this last one down, and as you can see here, it's off by just a tad, and just trim that off with your paper trimmer. Or you can leave it off and make this the very end. Either way you want to do it. I'm gluing it down this 6th page just because it's, well, it's an extra flap. Now, before you glue this down, granted, you want to trim that. You want to put decorative paper around on this page, so that way that'll be your border, the pretty paper. Let me see if I have some right here. So this is what you see. As opposed to black on black. Granted, you're going to put pretty paper here also, but, you know, just to give it extra little bit of pop. All right, that's a waterfall. Let me grab on this, just to show you what to do real quick. Let me zoom in. I'm really just going to, just on that part here, mark the pencil line. And then I will stick this into my trimmer and use that as my guideline as to where to cut. Alrighty, so now I cut that little excess off. It did leave a little tiny bit of a pencil mark there, which can easily be erased. Just so you have an idea of what it's going to look like. And you now have a waterfall, and you can either have this extra little back part, or had you left this part off, this last flip wouldn't have flipped. But whichever way you want to do it. All right, for the back pocket here, this piece of cardstock is 3 3/4 by 5. On the 3 3/4 inch side, I'm going to score it at a 1/2 inch. On the 5 inch side, I'm going to score it at a 1/2 inch and 4 1/2 inches. Ooh. That slid. And you fold it over and fold. Ooh. Alrighty. Right here, where you see this X, you were going to cut right down the center of that X across the line, as you can see, all the way across. This is going to be your pocket, and you do that so you don't have a bunch of overlap built up and being bulky when you put it on your page. Now, this is going to go right here. But before I do all that, I'm going to punch it with my favorite Martha Stewart punch. And what I do with this is I center my paper. And I always try to center it, because eventually when I cut the decorative paper, I just center that also from left to right here. And I punch. These little edges here, I do cut them off, so, and actually you don't even need to, because eventually you'll have decorative paper sticking inside there and it will cover up that little bit that's sticking out. So you can trim it off or not. It's all good. And there you go. That's a pocket. Stuff will stick in there. You will glue it on these 3 sides and tack it down. Alright, you know what? Let's go ahead and tack that down right now. On your pockets, I would highly recommend using liquid glue. If you use ATG or score tape, which supposedly doesn't ever dry, when you stick your tags in there, they'll stick. Right, see how I centered that on the bottom and on this page here, this back cover. And then eventually, when obviously a different piece of paper, it will just actually go in just a tad, enough to cover up that little fold that you folded over and to make everything look pretty. Oh yeah, one small little reminder. Do not glue your waterfall down until you cover the back of this with decorative paper. It will look so much better if you add the decorative paper first. Alrighty, we're getting ready to cut the decorative paper to cover the front and back, inside and outside covers. This paper is directional, so you need to make sure you cut it at in the right direction. This needs to be 6 by 4, so we're going to cut it 6 inches this way. So 6-inch mark will be right here, and you'll cut across. Because I want mine just a tad bit smaller, I'm going to cut it 1/8 inch smaller. As you can see here. And the other way is 4 inches, so again 1/8 inch smaller. Alright, because I want the 2 sides to kind of match, and if I cut it here at 4 inches, it's not going to. So I'm going to flip it around and cut it 3 7/8 inch. So that when you see them inside, let me show you here. Inside here, I'll have that on the outside. It matches up. As opposed to, we could have had this on the outside. And, you know, it still looks good, but I do believe this looks just a little bit better. Okay, on the outside, yes, the chipboard is still 4 by 6, but if you glue it down right here, this side is just a little bit wider, as you can see, that border. So on the next piece, I'm going to cut it a little closer to 4 inches. So we're going to do 5 7/8 again. and it's going to be more like 3 15/16. So instead of being on this line here, zoom in again. Instead of being on this line, lined up with this line here, I'm going to go in between this line and this line. Just to make it a little bit wider. And flip my paper around again so it matches up. Alright, so when we have our covers on, it's going to look like this. And then that leftover piece that you have, we're going to cut it to line up on this edge here, which would be 2.5. So just go ahead and cut this at 2.5. 2.5. And that'll go right here. Alrighty, we're going to ink our edges. This is the one that's a little bit wider. This is going to be on the outside covers. So I'm going to ink all of it. It doesn't take a whole lot. Alrighty. I do want this. You need to figure out which edge you want to have on the outside, and also what paper you're going to have on there, which way it's going to look best. Guess it doesn't really matter on this one. Put that up real quick. Have my camera in a little bit of a different spot, and it's kind of throwing me off. Now, when I do glue all this down, this will, instead of it being this way, will be this way, just for some contrast and to add a little bit of a pop of color. So I will only ink that side so I know which way I'm laying it down. So you can see it, this side doesn't look inked. Okay, and so there's no confusion later. Let me ink. These are going to be my inside covers. Again, I'm going to use the other side. I don't want the whole thing to look the same. And we want to get these laid down so that we can lay down our waterfall pages. Alrighty. I always mark, I figure out which way mine is going to lay. This side's up. So I'm going to flip this over and point up. And I'm going to do that in each and every page that I know something's going on. Because I don't want to take the chance of accidentally, like, see this side, my writing looks upside down. I don't want to take the chance of actually placing my stuff upside down, so and up. So when I go to glue it on, never did figure out, let's go that way. Yeah, looks good. What do I do with my... There it is. I'm still not feeling organized, but I need to finish this mini album so I can move on to my next project. I'm trying to force myself to finish a project before I start another one, so otherwise you end up with a bunch of projects that are left half done. Trust me, I have them, but I want to prevent myself from doing that anymore. So glue it down with a slight border, trying to make sure it's even on all sides. And spread out your glue. And again, a little reminder, with the beacon glues, I know this works, the 3-in-1 or the tacky glue made by Beacon, or the Fabri-Tac. But I don't know if it works with all the others. So don't just assume this glue eraser is going to work with them. You can tell where glue's been laid down if you do not get it up all of the way. It would have been bad had I placed my paper down in the wrong direction after putting the arrow, huh? Okay, apparently on this side I could have made it a little wider. Hopefully I didn't grab the wrong paper. Oh. Hopefully I'm not zoomed in too much. Alrighty, over here on this back pocket you want to do a test run on sliding it in, and you can actually cut it down if you want to where it only reaches to here. I figure it's already cut. I'm not going to worry about it as long as I get the glue in all the right places. I'm only going to put it 2/3 of the way down because that's the part that is going to be above the pocket. Otherwise you'll have a really hard time getting it in there. And the reason I'm willing to leave it the full length is because there's still a little lip down there that can cause a little bit of problems when you're putting your tags in it, pulling them in and out. Alrighty. Clean my tip. Okay. Burnish, burnish, burnish. This is where our little waterfall goes. So I do use a little bit of score tape for this. And that's just so I don't have to keep holding it while the glue dries. Alrighty. Okay, you know that weighs up. So center it the way you want it. You can put it a little bit more towards the top if you want, and then put some little colorful paper down here. Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. Alrighty, I laid my waterfall down before I put my magnet. Don't do that. I did get it up. A little bit of work. So now I'm going to have to try to fix this part right here. Hopefully it's fixable. As long as these edges are good, which is what's not going to be covered. Okay. Ooh, that is not liking that. Let me not do that again. Actually, this glue is still wet enough that I can get it off with my glue eraser, so as soon as I get all this off, I'll be back. Alrighty. We're going to use these magnets, basic gray. These are the small magnets. Just going to pull a couple out of an old package. Be careful when you do it because they will literally pop out and pop onto another one. For this part, I'll go ahead and use the little bit of adhesive that they have, and then I'm going to cover it with a little bit of score tape. Leave it like that. Now I'm going to close it, and on the other side I'm going to drop it and see where it falls. I'm just going to draw a pencil mark around that. If I can. Wow. Having issues today. Well, there's a little bit of a mark there. That is where I'm going to put my score tape. And then I'm going to again just let it go ahead and fall. And that's where it stays. I need to get that little thingy off, which is making... Apparently today's not my day, but I get that back down, put more score tape over it. And now can go ahead and go back to where we were a little while ago. Righty. Make sure that all the parts you need to have covered up are still covered up. Okay. Let's re-glue this down. And as you can see here, it does stick. So why is this not coming out? Okay, I gotta admit, normally I leave all this stuff out, but hopefully you'll learn from my mistake and just not do that. Make sure you put your magnet on first. I normally write magnet down on there, but obviously I did not today. Okay, are we centered? I think so. And push. Burnish, burnish, burnish. Even in here. So you can feel the magnets right there. Alrighty. Alright, that's down. Now all we have to do is add all the pretty paper. Okay, I'll be back. Zoom in a little. Alright, for this pocket here, it needs to be 3 1/8 your decorative paper by 3 7/8. So that's 3 1/8 this way. And then 3 7/8, so I cut an even amount off of each end. Oop, you can't even see that, can you? Alrighty, because it's actually 4 1/8, I'm going to cut 1/8 of an inch off of each side so it is even on all sides. So I'm cutting it 1/8 of an inch. Did I just? No, I'm good. Whew. Thank goodness. Alrighty. Now we're going to take the punch and center it and go ahead and punch. And same thing over here. Alright, you're going to ink it and then glue it down right there. Be back. Alright, there's her pocket glued down. Let's see something. Alrighty, I have the Graphic 45 journaling and ephemera cards. That's what we're going to use to decorate the rest of this. I pick all the ones that are portrait style, pick one of each, and then I set the other one to the side and flip it over. Now, these are landscape style. Set those aside for now. This is going to go here once you trim it down to fit the page. And this one is going to go here. Alrighty, be right back. All right, for your landscape style, that is what's going to go on your photo mat. You're going to cut that down to fit here. If you really want to, you can flip it over and put that on the other side, but normally there's a picture that goes there. It's going to be covered up no matter what. You have to put pictures somewhere. You can also put it on the pretty paper if you want to. Alrighty, and for these side little small flaps, okay, I'm going to, again, this is directional, so we don't want these, not yet anyway. We want one of each of these. And I already have one of these on the cover, but I'm still going to use one on the outside. But I do have this to where it goes on the cover here. It's going to be backed in black a little bit. And you'll cut these down to fit on here, and the other side will be blank for a picture. Now for these, you will use the landscape style, and you will just trim them down to fit here. And I would just alternate. So it would be the front side of this, the back side of that, front side of this, back side of that, and so on and so forth until you go through all the ones that are landscape style. If by chance you don't have enough, then you can use just a strip. It doesn't have to cover the whole page. You can just use a little tiny strip, enough to cover that part that you see here. So it'd be, you could cut it a 1 inch wide and it'd be good to go. On these front pages, they are 3 3/3 by 5 3/4. We are going to cut them down to 3 5/8 by 5 3/8. Let me show you how I go about doing that. Okay, we need it to be 3 5/8. Okay, this is the 3-inch mark right here. You count over 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's 5/8. So we're going to have to cut off a 1/4 of an inch, pretty much. So I take 1/8 of an inch off. That is 1 tick mark from each side. And I cut. And then I line it up on the 3 5/8. And I cut. So that way I can end up with about the same amount of blue on both sides of this frame. Now on this other end, it's not that big of a deal. Going down to 5 5/8, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. So it's another 2 tick marks, which is 1/4 of an inch. Alright, now if we bring that over here, you see that it fits. Oop, I guess I should zoom out a little bit and put something behind it so you can see without the mat. And you can, oop, and put it the right direction. Guess it doesn't matter, I'm not gluing it down yet, but yeah, you get the right idea. That way you have a little black frame all the way around, top, bottom, and the sides. Alrighty, so that would go right there. Now for the other side, the back side of this, it's the same thing. You literally cut it down to the same measurements and it'll fit right there. As you can see, the back side of this gets put down there. And it has the same exact frame. Alrighty, for the photo mat on the inside of this, I use the papers that are landscape style. Now on these, we need to cut them down to, because this is 3.5 by 5.5, we need to cut them down 1/8 of an inch smaller each way. So that's 3 3/8 by 5 3/8. So I want the majority of this in here. So all I'm going to do is cut off that little blue trim right there on the side. Pretty sure it's not, it's probably 1/16 of an inch, maybe, but it's just a sliver, as you can see. So now I can go, because I want to keep all of this prettiness going. And then you can do 3 5/8 if you'd like, or if you really want all of this to line up, you could have just cut a tick mark, 1/8 of an inch off total, and then flip it around and make it 3 5/8 at this point. So that way you can't see much of this frame, but it's there, and it's about the same distance from the edge of the paper. Oh, did I cut that the right size? I'm going by the wrong one. So let's that's supposed to be 3 3/8. My bad. Alrighty. Now we're 3 3/8 because we're doing the photo mat. On here, we need to go all the way down to 5 3/8, which is right here. So we're cutting off a total of 4. So I'm going to cut off 1/4 of an inch off of each side. And go down to 5 3/8. Now this will fit right here on our photo mat with a black border all the way around it. Alrighty. Here on the waterfalls, we use a landscape style. We are going to cut them 2 3/4 by 5 3/8. So we'll lift off of each end, make it 2 3/4. Now we need to make this 3 1/2. So we're cutting off quite a bit. Yeah, there's a frame around that, so I kind of try to keep my frames pretty even. Down to 3 1/2. Alrighty, so that will now fit right here with a little bit of a black border all the way around. Alright, on this little tiny flap, alrighty, again we're going around this page. Alright, it's going to end up being 2 7/8 for the decorative paper, which really doesn't leave a whole lot for you to cut off of each side. So I am going to cut I just cut off that little blue frame that was on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. And now we're going to make this 3 7/8, which is pretty much, well, actually, essentially, you're just cutting off that little border. And bam. You can see it has a little black border all the way around. Alright, you just do that to the rest of them and do enough to fill your whole book. This goes on the inside here. This went out here. Make sure you ink your edges and glue everything down. I'll be back. Alrighty, before I forget, these are our photo mats. I round my corners. I use a Crocodile Wear Memory Keepers 1/4 inch. Stick it there in the corners, flush on both sides here. And I'm also going to round the decorative edge, so that way, and I do round them for a reason. It's not just so it looks pretty. It's so when you're sliding it into the pocket, it's easier to slide in with a rounded edge. So you want to do that to all of your mats and all of the decorative paper that goes on it. And then when it comes time to stick it in the pocket, it just, I don't know, once it's glued down, it all slides in easier. I do have everything cut. One thing I forgot to add was this decorative paper here for that little bottom part. Go ahead and cut it at 2 3/4 by 3 1/2, and it'll go right there. Alright, once you get everything, all your edges cut on your photo mats and the decorative paper that belongs on it, ink everything. I have everything cut. Now is the time to ink it and then glue everything on. Thanks for watching.